The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, shattering on the Italian marble floor with a sound that made everyone at the launch party turn. But I barely noticed. My eyes were locked on my son Daniel, standing on the makeshift stage, his arm around his wife Madison as he addressed the crowd of Silicon Valley's elite. Daniel said with a practiced smile, gesturing toward me, "I'd like to thank Helen, our housekeeper, for helping set up tonight's event. She's been with the property for years, came with the house, like I was a refrigerator or a light fixture." Madison laughed, that tinkling fake laugh she'd perfected. "Yes, Helen's been such a help." The crowd chuckled politely. I stood there in my best dress, the one I'd bought specially for my son's big day, being introduced as hired help in the house I had owned for 37 years, the house I had sold to make his success possible. I said, my voice cutting through the laughter like a blade. The room went silent. Daniel's face went from confident CEO to caught child in seconds. Madison's smile froze like ice. Daniel rushed over, his voice too loud, too fake. "Everyone, this is my mother, Helen. She's been staying with us, temporarily, in my house." But I wasn't done. I announced to the crowd, I sold it to fund Daniel's company. Every marble tile, every designer fixture. The investors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Richard Chen, the lead investor from Silicon Valley Venture Partners, raised an eyebrow. "Good. Let them all know." "Mom," Daniel hissed, grabbing my elbow. "Not here." "Then when, Daniel?" Madison appeared at his side, damage control mode activated. She announced sweetly to the crowd, "She's been having episodes. The stress of aging, Daniel." My room, the 8x10 former storage closet they'd moved me into 6 months ago when they needed my master bedroom for a home theater, I said firmly. But Daniel was already steering me away, his grip on my arm just shy of painful. Behind us, Madison was laughing, making excuses, smoothing over my outburst with the skill of a professional manipulator. They deposited me in my closet room and left to return to their party, their celebration, their victory lap on the grave of my sacrifice. I sat on my narrow bed, listening to the music and laughter floating up from below, and made a decision. They wanted to erase me? Pretend I was the help? Fine. But I'd been living in this house for 37 years. I knew every creaky floorboard, every hidden space, every acoustic quirk, including the fact that sound from the home office carried perfectly through the old heating vent into my room. 3 nights later, I heard something that changed everything. It was 2 a.m. I was awake, as I often was these days, when voices drifted through the vent. Daniel and Madison, and someone else, Marcus. "Daniel's CFO and oldest friend," Marcus was saying. "We promised the investors a 40% margin." Madison's voice, cold and practical. "Move some expenses off the books. Create a few phantom customers. By the time they audit us," Marcus protested. Daniel replied, "Look, we do this for 2 quarters, max, just until the acquisition goes through. Bytecore is offering $100 million. My blood ran cold. My son, my honest, hard-working son, was planning to defraud his investors, the same investors he'd just been toasting at his party. I grabbed my phone and hit record, placing it right against the vent. For the next hour, I recorded every detail of their plan. Phantom customers named, fake invoices discussed. They were planning to scam Richard Chen. The irony wasn't lost on me. The next morning, I emerged from my room to find Madison in my former living room, doing something that made my heart stop. She had a trash bag in one hand and was throwing things into it with the other. My things, photo albums, my husband Robert's watch, the quilt my mother had made for my wedding. I gasped. She didn't even look up. "Decluttering. This old junk is ruining the aesthetic." I lunged for the bag. She held the bag out of reach with a smirk. "Family? Like how Daniel introduced you as the housekeeper? Face it, Helen, you're not family," she said slowly, as if talking to a child. "This was your house. Now it's ours. And you? She pulled out Robert's picture, our last anniversary photo before the cancer took him. Honestly, who keeps pictures of dead people? The photo went into the trash. Something inside me snapped, but instead of erupting, I went cold. Calculating, I said quietly, "I'm just a crazy old woman." She laughed, that same tinkling laugh from the party. Finally, some sense. I watched her throw away 37 years of memories. My wedding album, Lucas and Emma's baby pictures, my own grandchildren, whose grandmother I wasn't allowed to be, the flag from Robert's military funeral, all of it trash to her. But I smiled, because she'd just given me exactly what I needed, motivation to destroy them completely. I spent the next week playing the perfect broken old woman, shuffling around quietly, keeping my head down, not protesting when they moved me to an even smaller room, the laundry room this time, with a cot between the washer and dryer. Madison explained to her horrified mother on FaceTime. She likes small spaces. Don't you? I nodded meekly, while behind my back, my phone recorded everything. Daniel avoided me entirely, speaking to me only through Madison. Ask Helen to stay in her room tomorrow. But every night, I crept to my recording spot by the vent, and every night, I gathered more evidence. Marcus said one night. Daniel ordered, "The acquisition closes in 3 weeks. After that," Madison laughed. My son was planning to flee the country, to abandon everything, including me, for money. The boy I'd raised with values, with integrity, had become a criminal. I had enough evidence to destroy them, but I needed the perfect moment. It came 2 weeks later, the final investor presentation before the Bytecore acquisition. Every major player in Silicon Valley would be there, including Richard Chen himself, several tech journalists, and most importantly, the CEO of Bytecore. The presentation was held in my former living room, now converted into a high-tech conference space. I watched from the kitchen as tech's elite filed in, taking seats around the massive table that sat where my family's Christmas tree used to stand. Madison was in her element, playing hostess in a $5,000 dress, serving coffee from a machine that cost more than my yearly pension. She snapped, noticing me. "What are you doing here?" I said meekly. She rolled her eyes. "Fine, but stay out of sight." I looked down at my simple dress, the same one I'd worn to Robert's funeral, one of the few things she hadn't thrown away. Of course. The presentation began. Daniel was magnificent, I had to admit. Confident, charismatic, painting a picture of exponential growth and unlimited potential. The investors were eating it up. He lied smoothly, clicking through slides full of fabricated data. From the kitchen. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. 3 weeks of evidence, confessions of fraud, plans to flee, even Madison joking about leaving the old bat behind to deal with the FBI. I'd emailed everything to Eleanor, my husband's old attorney, that morning. She had copies of everything, just in case. But I wanted more than legal justice. I wanted them to feel what I'd felt at that launch party, complete and utter humiliation. Richard Chen said, "I'd like to address something. We've heard concerning rumors about your financial reporting." Daniel didn't miss a beat. "Absolutely. Every number has been verified by our internal team." That was my cue. I walked into the room, phone in hand. I said, my voice steady. Madison stood up so fast her coffee spilled. "Get out," Richard Chen said, studying me with interest. "Let her speak. You're Daniel's mother, aren't you?" I said. "The housekeeper who came with the property." Daniel's face went white. "Mom," I held up my phone. "A recording from 3 nights ago, a conversation between Daniel and Madison." Madison shrieked. "She has dementia! Daniel!" But Richard had already raised his hand. I hit play. My son's voice filled the room, clear as day. "The numbers don't add up. We promised the investors a 40% margin." Then Madison. "So we massaged the numbers, moved some expenses off the books." The room erupted. Investors shooting to their feet, the Bytecore CEO's face turning purple. Richard Chen sitting perfectly still, his expression carved from stone. I let it play. Every damning word, every criminal plan, every joke about fleeing to the Cayman Islands with investor money when it finished. The room was silent, except for Madison's hyperventilating, I said calmly. 3 weeks of recordings, detailed discussions of offshore accounts, fake invoices. I looked at my son, who seemed to have aged 20 years in 20 minutes. All because you were too proud to admit the company was struggling. Richard Chen stood slowly. Mrs. Whitman, I confirmed. Eleanor Steinberg. You may know her. The Bytecore CEO was already on his phone, probably calling his legal team. Other investors were heading for the door. The journalists were typing furiously on their phones. This would be front-page tech news within the hour. Madison screamed, lunging at me. You've ruined everything. Security, hired for the event, restrained her as she continued screaming. It's all her fault. She's jealous. I said quietly, I'm saving you from becoming fugitives. Daniel finally found his voice. Mom, I laughed, but it was hollow. You introduced me as the housekeeper. Daniel, at your triumph moment, you erased my existence. You threw away your father's memory, literally threw his photos in the trash. You moved me into a laundry room. Tears were streaming down his face now. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Madison said. I cut him off. Madison may have pushed, but you chose. Every cruel word, every dismissal, every lie. You chose. You traded your integrity for the appearance of success. Richard Chen approached me. Mrs. Whitman, I apologize for what you've endured. Rest assured, we'll be pursuing full legal action, I said firmly. I have the original deed, proof of sale to fund the company, and Daniel's written promise that I could live here for life. Madison was still struggling against security. Richard said coldly, Neural Sync is finished. The room emptied quickly. Investors fled like rats from a sinking ship. The journalists practically ran to their cars, eager to break the story. Soon, only Daniel, Madison, security, and I remained, I said quietly. The words exploded from me. 37 years of love turned to ash. You have 10 minutes to take your personal items and leave. Security escorted them out. Madison was still screaming threats about lawsuits and elder abuse. Daniel walked like a zombie, the weight of his destruction finally hitting him. At the door, he turned back one last time. For what it's worth, Mom, I did love you, before all this. I said sadly. They left, and I was alone in my house, truly mine again, for the first time in 3 years. Epilogue. 6 months later, the headlines had been brutal. Daniel got 5 years in federal prison. Madison got 3. Marcus, who had cooperated with authorities, got probation. The investors recovered some of their money from the frozen offshore accounts, but Neural Sync was dead. I restored my house slowly, lovingly. The marble floors were replaced with warm hardwood. The glass conference room became my craft room again. Robert's photos were retrieved from the trash and restored to their places of honor. Eleanor helped me establish the Helen Whitman Foundation for Elder Protection, funded with the settlement money from the lawsuit. We help seniors facing financial abuse from family members. You'd be amazed how common it is. Last week, I received a letter from federal prison. Daniel's handwriting, shaky but recognizable. Mom, I dream about that launch party every night. The moment I called you the housekeeper, the look on your face. I wake up wanting to take it back, to introduce you properly. This is my mother. Madison divorced me last month. She says I ruined her life by getting caught. Even now, she doesn't understand what we did to you. I do. Finally, I do. I'm learning carpentry here. Honest work with my hands. When I get out, I want to build things that last, not illusions that crumble. I don't expect forgiveness. I threw away the only real thing in my life for fake success. But I wanted you to know, you didn't just save the investors that day. You saved me from becoming someone even worse. Your son. If I can still call myself that, Daniel. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness would take time, maybe more time than either of us had. but acknowledgement was a start. Tonight, I'm hosting a dinner party. Real friends, not investors. Eleanor, my neighbors, some folks from the senior center. We'll eat off my old dishes, not imported china. We'll laugh about grandchildren and gardening, not margins and acquisitions. And when they ask about my family, I'll tell them the truth. I have a son in prison who's learning what matters. 2 grandchildren I hope to know again someday, and a house full of real memories, not manufactured ones. My name is Helen Whitman. I'm 72 years old. I sold my house to fund my son's dreams and almost lost myself in the process. But I learned that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't enabling someone's worst impulses. It's stopping them before they destroy themselves completely. The house is quiet now, but it's a good quiet, a peaceful quiet, the kind that comes when you're no longer afraid of being erased, dismissed, or thrown away like trash. I'm not the housekeeper who came with the property.